On the afternoon of Monday, February 7th, Lee Ventura and Kevin Phipps were sitting in the membership office of Anytime Fitness in Kensington. At this time, Mr. Ventura and Mr. Phipps heard a noise and found a patron had fallen on the floor from a seated position while using a biceps machine. Mr. Phipps ran to assist the patient while Mr. Ventura went to call 911. Mr. Phipps assessed the patient and found him to be pulseless and apneic. Mr. Phipps began to perform chest compressions, and once Mr. Ventura hung up with 911, he grabbed the AED and applied the pads to the patient. The AED analyzed the patient and a shock was advised. Mr. Ventura used the AED to defibrillate the patient and immediately continued CPR. The AED analyzed the patient a second time, and this time no shock was advised. The gentlemen worked together to continue CPR until the arrival of County Fire Rescue. Ironically, Mr. Ventura and Mr. Phipps had just completed CPR training 3 days prior and knew exactly what to do. The crew from Paramedic Engine 705 Bravo arrived on the scene and assumed patient care. Firefighter Belterre assisted the patient and placed him on the cardiac monitor. The patient was found to have a sinus rhythm with palpable pulses. A 12-lead EKG was performed and the patient was found to have an ST elevation. The patient's airway was protected with an oropharyngeal airway and ventilations were continued via bag valve mask. Medic 723 arrived on the scene, and together the crews worked to package the patient for transport. En route to Suburban Hospital, the patient began to become more alert and his respiratory effort improved to the point of no longer needing the bag valve mask. Firefighter paramedics Zaya and Belterre worked together to establish IV, start an amiodarone drip, consult with Suburban, and initiate a STEMI alert while transmitting the 12-lead EKG and monitoring the patient's condition. Upon arrival at Suburban, the patient was stabilized and monitored. The patient was transferred to the Virginia Hospital Center where he underwent cardiac catheterization and aortic valve replacement. These interventions were successful and the patient was discharged home neurologically intact a few days later. Thanks to the heroic actions of Mr. Ventura and Mr. Phipps, as well as the teamwork, skills, and knowledge of Montgomery County Fire Rescue, the patient, Mr. William Butts, is here today to thank the responders that saved his life. Mr. Butts, did you want to say anything?
Yeah. Well, it's a great honor and a pleasure to be here today to honor the people who saved my life, who brought me back to life and are the reason that I'm here. On that Monday morning, February 7, I woke up, I looked at my calendar for the week, looked like a good week. Plumber was coming that morning. The next day, I had a church meeting and a weekly Zoom meeting with former colleagues at the National Science Foundation. Then I had another Zoom meeting the next day. I was off to the Eastern Shore to look at the snow geese on Thursday. Saturday night, a concert at Strathmore Hall. Sunday night, a party at my house for the Super Bowl. Looked like a good week. And plenty of time for my 3 times a week visit to Anytime Fitness in Kensington. So the plumber came and went. Mid-afternoon, I went to Kensington to Anytime Fitness. I started out working on my quads and my calves, and then I thought I would go in and work on my biceps a little bit. So I sat down at the machine to do curls. The next thing I remember was 45 hours later when I opened my eyes at Suburban Hospital and looked into the eyes of my son Michael, and I said, "Where am I?" He said, "You're in Suburban Hospital, Dad. Your heart stopped. You were saved by the 2 guys at Anytime Fitness and by the EMT staff that arrived. They saved your life and they brought you here." Michael then told me in subsequent days how KP had brought my belongings from the gym over to Suburban. And he told me what he had learned from these gentlemen about how it happened. I didn't know. And how I ended up at Suburban and how the EMT, the paramedics, the firefighters, and the EMT from Kensington had saved my life. 2 doctors, one the heart surgeon, I had a triple bypass and a failed aortic valve. They told me, 2 different physicians, the heart surgeon and one other, looked me in the eye and said, "Mr. Butts, you are a very lucky man." They knew the circumstances of how my life was saved. And indeed, I was lucky. That had a little bit to do with it. If I hadn't been where I was, if the heart attack had happened somewhere else, I would have died. But luck was a small part of it. Most of it was the skill, the experience, and the partnership of these men and the others who worked with them. And I want to thank you very, very much.